Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we've got, as usual, Jeff Rutt with us. Say hello to the people, Jeff.
Hello to the people.
And we have a very special guest this week. We've got Jay Fechtel, who is the CEO of the Fechtel Company. He'll tell us all about that and its history. But welcome to the program, Jay.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
And Jeff, why don't you kick us off?
Yes, Jay, thank you for joining us on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about what it was like in the early years of growing up in the Fechtel home, spiritual formation, any fun entrepreneurial journeys in junior high or those school years, and tell us about what that period of life was like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I had an interesting background. Grew up in an entrepreneurial family. Both my mother and father were very engaged in different business starts and ongoing in the real estate, construction, development. My mother started a school, and we had, in fact, for that experience early in her career, had a chance to go live in Italy for a year where she got trained. And that was probably one of the beginning things I remember about doing business, because I was 12 years old over there, and we were living with three families and had 13 kids. And I was the second from the oldest, but I was being tutored because I was too old to go to the school with all the rest of the kids. And I learned I could go buy chocolates down in the village for a fraction, just a few lira, and bring them back and sell them to a captive market back in the family. But it also led to the time where I was sitting on my bed and I looked over there and there's this pile of lira, and I just felt so guilty and kind of so dirty for, I don't know. I didn't have the right attitude, that's for sure. But we had a fun family. My family did split up. We came initially from a Catholic and Episcopal background, and I didn't really have a relationship with Christ. Didn't hear a whole lot about evangelical things, but had a God awareness. My parents were divorced when I was 14. I went to live with my grandmother for a couple of years, and I had people praying for me, but it still wasn't until I got out of college. My first year out of college, I'm downtown Tampa, Florida, where I moved to get out of the small town I was in and moved to what then was the big city, which was really not a big city. But a buddy of mine who from college shared Christ with me, from high school, and gave my life to Christ. I was about 25 years old, but really pretty empty at that point. I was working for a public accounting firm because I had no idea what I wanted to do. Became a CPA, and I'm still trying to figure out life, and that led to a big change. But family was fun. We had my dad was a serial entrepreneur, and so he was the kind of person that believed in delegating and empowering. And so from the time I was very little, he gave a lot of opportunities for that. He bought a KOA campground one time, and I was a junior in high school or a sophomore in high school, didn't have a job in the summer. The people running the campground quit. And so at 16 years old, I didn't have a car, but I drove our tractor 15 miles to get there. And I lived there for a summer and ran a KOA campground, opened the store, cleaned the toilets and the pool. And but that was just one of many different experiences like that growing up.
Were you in Florida?
Great family
you
situation.
Grew up in Florida?
Grew up in Florida, Central Florida.
And then what was the Italy junket?
Well, that was an educational program where my mom, who started a school, one of the first Montessori schools in Central Florida, she really wanted to do it right. So she went to the Montessori Training Center in Bergamo, Italy, and the family went over with her.
For how long?
That was a year-long experience.
Okay, wow.
And I basically, I schooled 3 days a week for 4 hours, and the rest of the time I just wandered the city. I'm still shocked about how my parents let a 12-year-old just, go do whatever he wanted in a foreign city. So it was a great experience.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's pretty
That's
cool.
amazing.
And then you went off to Washington and Lee, is that right?
That's right. Yep. Went to
Tell us about
Washington and
those
Lee.
years. Yeah.
I was really, I found out about that school because I wanted to play basketball. I wasn't good enough to play football at some of the places I wanted to go. And so I went up there and played basketball. It turned out to be a very good educational experience as well. And that led to coming back to Tampa in the public accounting world.
So you and I we both got a cup of coffee for 2 years at Arthur Andersen. You're a
Okay.
couple of years ahead of me, but yeah, that's like the MBA where they pay you, but you pay for it in hours worked. It felt like below minimum wage. So if you,
That's right.
were you in
I
audit or
was,
tax?
yeah, I started in audit, and then I ended up in the small business
Oh
division
yeah,
where, that was the big thing they were doing at that time.
that's where the real entrepreneurs went. Okay, the entrepreneurial accountants, but
I was so figuring it out, but you're right about they get the work out of you. I'll tell you that.
yeah, they definitely get. That's good. That's good experience. Okay, and then what was the first job after Andersen?
Well, the first job after Anderson, it was really interesting time. It's right around the time that the S&L crisis
All right.
hit, and real estate was really hurting. And my mom and dad were divorced at this point. They had split up. My mother was in Tampa developing real estate and doing a great job at it. She's very creative, design, build, developer, one of the first women contractors in the state of Florida. But she got into some debt situations and needed work. I'm working at Arthur Andersen. I mean, she needed help trying to work these deals out. I'm at Andersen, and she said, "Hey, I can't afford to pay you anything, but I need help." And it was just a family thing. I just went over there and said, "Put me to work." She couldn't afford to pay me, and I don't know how I got by. She fed me periodically. I wasn't married at this point, so I didn't have much better to do. But I just remember for a whole year, I don't know how I survived, but had a little savings, and she was able to, buy some things here and there or pay me enough so I could buy things. So we worked through that. That was really a challenging time where I did learn a lot about right about the time I was developing a relationship with Christ and feeling the call to business, but seeing that mess going on. It was a lot of thoughts swirling around my mind for sure.
I want you to talk about some of those. This is mid '80s for the people listening, mid into the late '80s.
Right.
So not all the listeners. Arthur Andersen had me work in the war room for the for the workout deal in DC at the time. So
Okay.
I made a lot of people rich while I was wearing my polyblend suit. And but I wasn't one of them. And I remember the lessons from that period. But I'd love that was much more personal though with your mom and
Yeah.
so many people got over leveraged in real estate at that time. Talk about maybe the lessons. So you had sort of the spiritual formations happening, but then also these sort of business lessons of a downturn and how to survive it, especially in real estate. Maybe you could talk about both of those trails.
Yeah, I think that, I look at a handful of things came out of there. One was just learning how to be resourceful.
Yeah.
My mom was great at that, but she encouraged me to become a real estate licensee agent.
Sure.
And I had a family, a buddy from Washington and Lee University who came down, and his family was developing real estate around Florida. And he said, "Hey, I need to find some property." And I said, "Well, maybe I can find it for you." My very first real estate transaction, back in those days, this was a lot of money, but I walked out of a bank on a December 24th, Christmas Eve, with $100,000 check, real estate commission, which fortunately helped to kind of help the family with some debt payments at the time. But just diversifying and looking for ways to scrap out and make a living, that was a big lesson of that time. But another thing that I think probably was significant is the perils of debt.
Yes.
And I think in there, and also just, I was listening to a lot of Business by the Book,
Yeah.
audio cassettes by Larry Burkett. And
Yeah.
I say audio cassettes, that really dates me, you know, but
Hey, at least you didn't say 8-track. Okay.
that's right. I'm a little younger than that, but in any case, those things were really formative for me. I'd just drive around just soaking it up. And, you know, Larry had a big uh, debt-free kind of mentality, but
Yeah.
that really was established me in the business side. And ever since then, we've stayed debt-free in our approach to business. So
Not easy to do in real estate either. I mean, talk about a business that most people say demands leverage. So, I mean, what's that been like to be in an industry that uses a lot of leverage and be the guy who tries to avoid it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. A lot of prayer has gone into that. I mean, part of it is you just grow slow. You know, there's
Right.
a curve there where instead of going right,
Right.
you know, shooting for it and go for it, you just got to save, and then grow slowly and investing in portfolios. But the other thing is, you know, I did a couple projects with partners. There's a great friend who at the time was not a believer, but he approached me about a deal, wanted me to develop this parcel that he had. And I prayed about it and felt like I could not be a partner with him because of our, unlike, we didn't have share the same faith. Um, so what we did is he hired me on contract, and I did a contract for him on that project. And somewhere in the mix there, he came to know Christ in the next
Wow.
8 months. And then we joint ventured a project,
Wow.
another one. So, you know, there's been some key relationships there where somebody would bring the finances and I would
exactly.
provide and those are on a little bigger deals, smaller. I've stayed more small, niche oriented, where too small for maybe a really small mom and pop and too big for a bigger developer to look at it. And there's a market there.
What do you think? What was the catalyst for your faith increasing in your mid-20s?
You know, it's really business.
Really?
The challenge of business kept me on my knees.
Huh.
And more and more, you know, I made so many mistakes. It's somebody asked me to speak to this group of young executives and young business owners over a period of time. It was a CBMC type thing. And I started out, I developed, you know, what am I going to say? And I thought, well, maybe I came up with my top 7 failures of, you know, in business. And then the next time it was like the top 9 and then the top 11. I think I got up to like
the list grew.
Yeah, I didn't have time enough to go through it, like the top 15 failures. And, you know, so in the midst of that, just learning to pray and depend. I think my big failure growing up is I just got too independent and self-sufficient and, you know, used to bailing myself out and doing the work instead of really trusting God. And so that pattern, I've really, even now, I have to be very careful with that pattern in my walk with Christ to be sure I'm walking by faith and not by sight.
Yeah. Well, maybe that challenge that your mother had that she pulled you into is actually a gift. It probably sounded sacrificial at the time for you to do that. I mean, that's not the normal career path for you know, back then was probably a big 8 accounting guy, but that sounds like you learned a lot of lessons. Now you've kind of kept on this trajectory. So why don't you talk about like the businesses that you developed? And I know there's been a lot of real estate related things and there's been some generosity. How did you think about your business platform for generosity over time? Obviously this is the Generous Business Owner Podcast, but I know you've got some interesting stories and Alan Barnhart introduced us all. So maybe just talk about that trajectory of your career and how you thought about that eventually as a platform.
Yeah, I think, you know, to be very candid, when I first got into business, I wasn't thinking about generosity at all. I was thinking about survival, you know, and really just excellence, really focused on trying to excel at what I was doing. But I had at that time, you know, I didn't know what God was going to do in terms of providing additional income, surplus, or anything. But I think that, as a sense of calling, I know that God called me into it. I also had at that very time, I happened to meet a guy named Buck Jacobs who was living in Tampa.
Oh, right.
And before C12 was formed, he was the FCCI local area coordinator. And he kind of took me under his wing. And I'm a young guy. And, I told him I felt like I was going to be doing business one day, and I'm working for my family at that time. And he just mentored me and discipled me there early on. And then he had this radical idea to start this C12 thing. And, he said, "Hey, will you be one of my guinea pigs?" And so, I was in the first C12 group in Tampa, and he had a group in Sarasota and Bradenton. But I would have to say that being exposed to Buck and his teachings took all of I had a real passion in business to bring the Lord into it. I didn't understand how. I just knew if I was going to do it, God had to be a big part of it. And that really help, I think, cement that commitment and the how-to part of that as well. Just being a part of those early C12 meetings. And at that time,
what year do you think that was? I've talked to Buck, and he's just an amazing guy, kind of the founder of C12. We were talking earlier before we started recording it. Mike Shero, of course, now runs it, and he's been on the program. But those early years, what was that like? Because that wasn't a popular. I mean, it didn't really exist.
Yeah. It was just some people who had been influenced by Buck and thought, sure, I'll give it a go. And
right.
It was going to cost me $300 a month. And I thought, can I afford that?
Right. Exactly.
But I will say it's probably been the single most powerful influence in my life over the years, not just in the business, but in my personal walk with God, learning to hear God, to seek God, and in my family, making my marriage better, my parenting. It's hard to explain, but when you get with that group and when you're really focused on it, there's a lot of peer-to-peer encouragement and challenge. And plus, I have to say this now, and this is for Mike Shero and all my writer friends at C12, if they ever, I talk about it, but Buck was an absolute radical in his day in terms of really willingness to just get in your face and in a great way, in a loving way, and challenge you to live for Christ through your business and to see that business as a platform for ministry. And there was no other option. In fact, as Buck's mentee, like I could not do that. Like right. Even to this day, he'd probably call me up and give me a hard time if I got off the rails. So, in any case, that was really formative. But again, thinking more in terms of how to run the business and excel at the business, how to do it well, how to honor people and do all the things that we really strive to do as we do business. And it was only later that the income part came along, and that's where I remember, not far from where I am right now, with probably the first big like, wow, there's a bunch of money here,
right?
And I was, what do I do now? What do I do with that? And that began a journey that has included not just C12, which encourages it, but connecting with Bob Collins down here in Tampa, who became a great friend. And before NCF had a Tampa Bay presence, I got together with him and started working with the local foundation. And then we created NCF Tampa Bay, served on the board of that for a while, but was just growing and learning about this world that had all sorts of interesting opportunities then to, leverage resources.
I love it. And that did result in a gift. You want to talk about the kind of gift you made, as much as you're comfortable kind of talking about giving a piece of the company? Was that?
Sure. Yeah, that was, I think as I was growing, I even having conversations with friends about some of those serious questions, like how much is enough, and
right.
How to build in safeguards into your life and your business so that wealth and some of those things couldn't get you as easily as it might. But one of the things I remember, just out of a principle of honor, really just honoring the Lord, I came to this conclusion that, I'd love to be able to give part of the company to the Lord. It's all the Lord's anyway, but like right. Structurally actually gift that, to take a certain amount of funds off the table just right off the bat. And, having been a CPA, I will say there are some real tax benefits to doing that as well. That wasn't the main reason, but that certainly helped out as well. But I think it was just a desire to see that company not just talk about it, but actually take a chunk of the ownership, gift it, and let that carry on, and then talk to the team about it and encourage them to be generous as well through other opportunities like creating a match program for giving inside the company and ramping up our ministry activity and serving the community and doing things like that. So yeah, that was.
Jay,
do
do you mind sharing?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Do you mind sharing what year that was? That you did
That was about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So that would have been 2014. Well, maybe before that, actually, a little longer, 2012-ish, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And now you have a couple of businesses. You have kind of the parent company, and then you have another bit. You want to just talk about the structure a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So we have the Fechtel company, which is a pure construction company, does the construction. And then at heart, what I didn't realize and what led me into the business in the very beginning is I'm a designer. We have a design company, and we do design build. So my real joy and the thing I bring to it is listening to people and sketching it and drawing it and kind of getting it conceived, putting that package together, and then the team builds it. But so we have a design company that does the design. And then we have a company called Custom Care Forces, which is another sister company that's really more pure labor, skilled craftsmen that do various work that when we find we can't get something done as economically through a trade contractor, we will have that group do it. And then there's some things we want to control more, like our job site conditions and labor and things like that, certain skilled work that takes place, punch out and so on. And but then that's primarily the three primary companies. I've also done some things in the energy efficient industry. We've implemented that into our projects, but particularly in the heat recovery area, we've developed a heat recovery product called the Zero Energy Water Heating System, which is a passive heat recovery device. Pretty cool little thing. And so I've always enjoyed the science of the structures as well as the artistic part of it.
So when you made the gift, was it one of these sub companies or was it kind of the parent?
So what I did at the time, those companies weren't as developed. They were small and fledgling,
right.
And where the bulk of the revenue and the bulk of the income and everything was coming through the Fechtel company, the construction company. So I basically got with NCF and I said, hey, I'd like to do this. How? They really made it easy. They actually connected me with Alan way back then. Alan had a template that he had used, and I actually just borrowed that template. And I'm happy to share that template we did at the time, with anybody who ever wanted to do it. But we changed the names and worked it out and got a little local Florida legal advice and all that kind of thing. So practically and mechanically, it was very simple. Had a local attorney that oversaw it and and then put it into, just implemented it and did the gift, worked with our CPA locally to be sure that was all done properly.
Yeah. And then that was 20%, right? Was that the
right amount? And then 5 years later, we ended up doing something similar to what Alan and others have done to avoid having to designate the funds to go to just one charity. We created a voting trust, another 1% voting trust, and NCF, the charity, is also the beneficial interest of that as well. But that gave us the ability now to run the company with the voting trust and enable the funds that we have to go to any ministry and not have to designate one after a 5-year period. Now, I think the IRS has actually changed the rule on that, and I don't think you have to do that anymore. But at the time, that's what we had to do.
And just and that business is still operating, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So it's just a piece of the ongoing operation. That's what we've done, and
It's
that's what.
just, yeah, from a stewardship standpoint, NCF Charitable Trust is one of my owners,
Shareholders,
voting trust,
essentially.
1% owner.
Yeah.
And I,
Economic owner, not
yeah,
control, but
and
economic. Right. So when you
right,
make
they
a
don't
distribution
control.
to shareholders, or
Yeah,
you
they don't
know,
control. They're a very fine partner to have in
nice.
business with you, and we we've also done that on some real estate,
Okay.
which is really interesting. There's a 12-acre development parcel that we're actually currently developing right now, finally after years. But somewhere after that period, I had a piece of real estate that had a very low basis and had gained a lot of value. And that's an ideal situation if you're going to fund your giving for years to come, is to take a very low basis, high value asset and donate it instead of using after tax money to donate, to do appreciated asset giving. And so we're in the process. We gifted that long ago, in the process of developing it now. It's owned by an LLC, but 100% of the LLC is owned by NCF Charitable Trust. And those funds, when sold, will come back back into my donor advised fund.
Right.
So it's
so of course
it's like the
Alan's got.
no-brainer. It's like the no-brainer of all no-brainers, and
This is
one
great.
of the few.
We've got the recovering CPA giving us the layout. I love it. Two CPAs geeking out on this.
I know. I'm
stuff,
sorry
but
to get into the weeds.
no,
there.
I love it. And then okay, and then where's the heart piece? Like when what do you love giving to? What kind of stuff do you like giving to?
Yeah, I think my wife and I were just talking about this again the other day and refreshing. I think over the years, I don't know what it is, even before I knew Christ, I always would gravitate toward just marginalized peoples, or people who were being taken advantage of, or were just impoverished, poor. I don't know what it was, but that's been a real focus, I think, of where our passion has been, is those people. And then increasingly over the years, the persecuted church, brothers and sisters who are being persecuted overseas, really, out of conviction. I had a great brother and a friend who wrote a book about it, and really opened my eyes to the fact that the majority of the New Testament giving, if you really look at the context of it, the large majority of it was to help fellow brothers and sisters in need. And that was a big priority of the writers of the Gospels, and Paul and the New Testament letters. And so that's been an increasing area of interest. And then all along, the kind of the just human rights issues, whether I consider the abortion issue to be like a human rights issue, just love supporting life causes and freedom of religion, religious freedom and life are big motivators, I think, for Terri and me, my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think the other thing, I'm entering C12 mode with the balance wheel is now in my head about the sort of 360 look at your life. So that's why it helps with more than just the business. But I think the thing that I thought was really interesting that you said about Buck was how he challenged you, and this has been true of me too. I think C12 has really helped me really repeat every single month. What is the business? What is the purpose of the business, right? To glorify God, bring others into relationship with Him more than it is about anything else. And so I think the thing that maybe I struggle with, and I know a lot of other C12 members, let alone people that aren't members of C12. And of course, that's what we're trying to encourage on this podcast, is how do you use this platform for ministry? So, we talked about the ministry area, literally as one of the sort of main pillars of C12. How do you think about using this business as a platform? And I know you're on the board of C12 nationally and this sort of thing. And I know nobody's got it all figured out. But I mean, you sort of ticked off some things about the way you treat employees, the way you do matching, that kind of thing. Do you mind unpacking a little about that? So when you're talking to somebody about a sort of the ministry of your business, what are the components of that?
Yeah. Well, there's so much there. We got another hour on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But just maybe in
But,
4 or 5 minutes, just a
I
summary
think
of those pieces.
when just all entrepreneurs and all business owners, I think they have to settle something really important up front, and that is that God really does own the business.
Yeah.
And I said that in my mind early in my business career, and I believed it in my mind. I didn't always live it. And what I'm really focused on now is, yes, that's really true. And when you go into that with that mindset, then that informs your mission, your vision, your values. It all becomes about what's the Lord want to do here. And so I think beginning with that is the most important thing. And then just big picture, intentionality. I think one of the biggest failures I had was, I'd go to a meeting, a C12 meeting, or maybe talk to another business owner and, get a great idea, write it down. Boy, that's a great idea. I got to do that. I ought to do that. And, then a month goes by, and another month goes by. And, at some point you just have to pick the one or two things that you really feel like God wants you to do, and just be intentional and stay after those until they're done. And then do another one. You don't have to tackle the whole world at one time. Just start small, start somewhere, and implement something will make a difference, and to help that business really glorify God even more. It could be something as simple as a HR practice that you start doing. Maybe you develop relationships with your team more closely by having a defined thing. One of our big goals is try to help our team flourish like individuals and do their best. And there's been so many little pieces to that, but I think just being intentional to start somewhere, even if it's small.
That reminds me, in my C12 group, we've got a beautiful guy who's a doctor, and I love the simple thing he does. For example, is in his waiting room, it says, take this rock, and if you'd like prayer, just hand it to the doctor or the nurse when you enter the room.
That's great.
And you just hand the rock, and they know what that means, that they can pray for you. That's
Wow.
it. I mean, but I think sometimes
so simple.
We think it has to be this. So I like that encouragement of just one step at a time. It doesn't have to be this grand plan, day one, massive ministry plan. Just, start with, put a Bible in the waiting room. I mean, whatever it is.
I'll tell you a neat story about that. We had gotten to the point where we felt like in our company ministry and our company approach to ministry, we had been kind of doing.
Right.
And some of us got together in the company and we said, let's stop doing. Let's just spend some time praying and wait for God to bring something to do. And I'm not kidding. I'm in this room right now, this conference room. One day we were having a meeting praying, and some lady just stumbled off the street, came into our door. Never had happened before. This is not an area where people walk by where we are. It's kind of a suburban office environment. Stumbled in, was clearly being just had life was tough.
Yeah.
And a couple of the ladies in our company just wrapped their arms around her and began to develop a relationship with her. A year and a half later, she was coming to our company retreats, and she was doing well and had a relationship with the Lord. And in any case, things like that just happen, but we began with prayer. And that kind of taught us something early. And since then, we've really had more of a focus, I think, on pray first, do second.
Yeah. Shout out to our buddy Peter Greer, right, Jeff?
Yeah, lead with prayer.
So I'm reading a book right now that Mike Sharrow sent me. Thanks, Mike. Mike is great about sending people books. But Mike sent a book that he looks at the prayer life of leaders. I can't remember the actual name of it.
Is it Lead with Prayer? Is it a blue book?
Lead with Prayer.
Yeah. Okay. So that was written by
connection for him.
Yeah, that was written by Peter Greer, the president of Hope International.
So, I think John Mark Comer had that's exactly right. And
that's the one.
And when I saw that, I went, cool. That's Jeff. I'll be talking to these guys soon.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Jay, a couple quick questions and just a highlight here before we round the corner. So talk to us a little bit about, I want to take us back to the giving that 20%. A lot of people think that's radical, giving 20% of your company. What did you go through, if you can remember back in your mind and in your prayer life? And what kind of regrets did you have, if any, after that? What kind of impact has that had on you in your business? Has NCF uh, gotten involved in the control of the direction of your company? By the way, if you could give our listeners, I don't think they know the size and scope of the homes. You mentioned you're a home builder, but I don't know if we mentioned what kind of home builder you are. But just unpack that a little bit, if you could, for our
Yeah.
listeners, because we hear, Alan Barnhart talks a lot about, he hears people say, well, that's really radical, but we happen
Yeah.
to believe actually it's radical not to look at this. But talk about your
Yeah.
experience.
Well, I think part of just, foundational commitment. I remember somebody said something to me. I wish I could remember who it was. They said, "Hey, it's not about how much you give, it's about how much you keep."
Right.
And that was kind of a mind-bending statement at the time. But I think, first of all, our company, we do homes that are really pretty good size. I would say the average construction contract is about 3.5 million, in that range. So we do we've done some $10 million projects, some smaller projects as well. And that's not all we do. We also do some small boutique type things for clients just to help them. But no regrets at all. It's an interesting thing. If anything, just like freedom, just like, maybe the only regret is we didn't do more, back at the time. I don't remember where the 20% came. It's just like 20%. And if you're doing any giving anyway, and your business is your primary source of income, you're already given, but you're giving it after tax. So, not to put on the CPA hat here again, but you're going to give anyway. Why not just give it before the government gets it?
Amen.
And let that happen. But I think that going through that process, there's a lot of joy just knowing that, to follow through on what really was a little step. And one day when I grow up, I'm going to be like Alan Barnhart and a bunch of other guys who are really, helping set the pace in that area. But yeah, I would just say a lot of joy, and NCF is a great partner. They want to see your business succeed. They're not in your boardroom, every day. There's communication that takes place here and there, but it's not like you're bringing in some potentially dangerous partner. You're completely aligned. They're happy for your success. You both have the same goals, so it's a good thing.
Exactly. And we'll put an NCF link, a link to C12, and a link to the Lead with Prayer book
Amen.
in the
Yeah.
show notes.
And I think you.
I thought about you, by the way, when I saw Peter on there. I remember having that thought. And I'm only about a fourth of the way through the book right now.
Yeah, I'm reading.
Great,
it.
great,
It's
great
really
book,
great.
though.
Yeah.
That's a good plug. And I thought your tips on the ministry were fantastic, and you can expand on that if you want. But the way we try to always close, Jay, is just a practical tip. Somebody on this journey who's just trying to make this pivot, and think about using their platform for generosity, whatever that means. That could mean generosity means a lot of things. But what's just maybe a practical tip you'd leave with somebody behind you on the journey today, move in that direction?
Yeah, I think that business owners tend to be really busy all the time. We go hard, we work hard, we get things done. And the thing I'd say, first of all, is if there is any lack right now in your time with God, personal time with God, begin there. Don't let that suffer. Begin every day and just seek the Lord about it and see what God says. Stay in the Word. Take that topic to the Lord in your time with Him. What do you want me to do with your business and with your resources? I think I did that. I went through a really hard time the last 3 years. I think I mentioned to Jeff, we had talked about this once before, I don't know, but when COVID hit, all of our building projects slowed down and got more expensive. And so, some of our clients were on cost plus basis, that not real happy about that. Some of our clients, all of our clients, not real happy with things slowing down. And in the building business, it's not how much money you make, it's how fast you make it, because the same amount of money spread out over a larger time is difficult. And so, we actually got into some cash flow tightness where I didn't have the ability to give through the company as much as we had done in the past or personally. And, we're debt-free mindset. So it really challenged me to do what I just said to you, to get in my time with God and say, God, what would you have me do? And it really came down to just hearing from him some fresh vision about ministry through the company and about how he wanted us to operate, led to some structural changes in our team. And it's been so good. But I would say begin with that, hear from God. God will let you know. God speaks in lots of different ways, but God does speak. And so you'll understand that. And then, from a practical standpoint, I think you just have to make the commitment. Yes, I'm going to do this. I am going to do this. Not, I might do this, but I am going to do this. And then just, set the timetable, work it out.
Love it. Full commitment. And then meet with the owner. If you're fully committed to God being the owner, you got to have your owners meeting every morning. And
that's right.
A few things come to mind. Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom and all these things will be added to you, comes to mind. But then also like Terri Looper, who we've had on and wrote a great book about making decisions with God, is he goes, we have an unfair advantage in business. He said, we got the God of the universe who will tell us what to do. Just ask him. And it's sometimes it's hard to be on, I'll say for me, on my timetable instead of God's, and his timetable is always right on time. I'm the one who's out of pace often.
Yeah.
But
I'm wearing that T-shirt right now. It's underneath. It's underneath.
Exactly. But Jay, can't thank you enough for joining us. This has been great.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. Thanks for stimulating us out here in the market to do good things and to change our minds and help us there. So I appreciate it very much.
Thanks everybody for joining us on this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. Share it with a friend and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.